strings and how to manipulate them. I have a presentation from Log Analysis Made Easy Creations, L.A.M.E. What we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about how to use strings. Strings are an integral part of PowerShell, but the ability to manipulate them is a really powerful tool within PowerShell. So let's just jump right in. Again, this is part of a video listing of videos. Part of my channel. If you're just jumping in this randomly, please look at the comments down below and see the video channel, and you'll have a whole list of training videos that you can follow if you're interested in it. And one of the things we really try to focus on is I do almost all of my work inside Linux. It's just kind of a proof of concept to prove that while PowerShell is an amazing, amazing tool for system administration and scripting in Windows, this tool has actually migrated and is very useful within Linux and Mac. So I'm going to actually use a Ubuntu laptop, and I'm going to do almost everything in these video trainings inside Terminal inside Ubuntu. And so let's jump to it. First thing we're going to do, talk about strings, is the ability to manipulate strings. Really simple. If you have a string and you need to get stuff to uppercase or to lowercase, very simple command. You can just use that to upper. And the same concept, you can take something to lower. So if you've got something that you've got format and needs to make sure that it's all in lowercase or uppercase, or you want to compare things, often a really good example of using this is Windows usernames. It's amazing how a username, one time the name will come in capitalized, one time it'll come in lowercase, sometimes it'll come in a mixture of both. And when you want to compare them, you really want, or you want to write them and say, hey, give me all the unique users who logged onto a system. You don't want to count an uppercase name and a lowercase name as the same, as a different name. You want to join them together, and a really easy way to do that is with the to upper to lower command. And so let's demo that. So if we jump over to our PowerShell inside my terminal of Ubuntu, I've got a root here. I'm just going to clear the screen, and we can see this. We're going to go make ourselves a string. So temp string equals the brown fox ran over the fence. If I run that, I can pull back this temp string, and we see, okay, well, what if I want to get it all into lowercase? I can go to lower, and it's now written all in lowercase. I want to write it to uppercase. Now, notice, I want you to know, if I run temp string again, it's back to its normal case. These commands themselves are not changing the string's actual values. It's changing what is displayed and what is being processed. So if I actually want everything to be in uppercase permanently, I need to do something like this: temp string equals temp string dot to lower. And now if I run temp string, everything will be written in lowercase. And so just running to lower, to upper, and most of these commands we're going to talk about manipulating strings, they're not actually going to change the underlying value of that variable, that string. It'll just display how it's being processed at that moment. If you want to permanently change it, you need to assign it to another variable or to itself using this methodology. Next one, let's talk about replacing strings. Here are common names. I think that's what CN is in a domain controller. And the principle is what we'd like to do is we want to remove out all of the CNs so that in the end we just have a list of usernames. We want at the end JUser, JDoe, JSmith, Brown. And so I'm going to copy this because I don't want to type it all, but I like it as a good example. I'm going to copy. We will copy this string here, and then we will move over to the terminal. We're going to use temp string equals, paste that in, and I have a double quote at the beginning. Remove that, and now if I write temp string, we can see there's my stuff. I want to replace CN equals, and so all we'll do is temp string equals temp string dot replace, and I want to replace the cn equals with blank. So that should work, and if I'm done, did this right, we now have a list of just comma separated values because the cn equals is gone. Now, what if we want, that's great, but it's still not the easiest thing to manipulate. So we could actually split here on the commas and turn this into an array. If you're not familiar with your array, please reference my videos and look for how to do arrays. I cover it and we'll show you how to do it, but we'll do it real briefly here as well. I'm going to take this equals temp string split, and I want to split on the commas. So now when I write temp string, instead of writing it from left to right, it writes it up and down, and that's because it's an array of strings. It's a list of strings. And the way strings work is the first item is index 0, index 1, index 2. It's a little gotcha. You got to remember arrays start their counting at 0. And so if I want to see temp string 1, that's not going to be JUser, it's going to be JDO. And then we can see that. All right, so now we've taken that CN, we've removed the CN, we've got the commas out of there. Let's go do a count. Let's see what the count is. And count is going to be a little fun. If I just run temp string dot count, it's going to tell me 5. And what it's really doing is it's looking at item 0 by default. Default index number is 0. And it's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters. I can do temp string 1, and that should count JDO, which should be 4. And that's exactly what we want. I'm going to do a the brown fox jumped over the fence. And if I do this, and now I go $a string count, I'm going to get 1. And so anyway, if I go, sorry, count is the amount of items in there. And so I don't even know why I didn't pay attention when I gave you the answer. When I put in 1, it came back with 1. That's because there's 1 item in this index slot. There is 1 item, a string. This is a one-dimensional. I don't know if you really want to call it a one-dimensional array, but it's got 1 item. This has 5 items. So count tells you how many items are in that count. But if we switch this to length, we'll see that it is 35 characters long. And that's important. Length will tell you how long the item is you called. Count will tell you how many items are in a variable. And so if we go up to this and switch this to length, it should come as 4. And that's because JDO is 4 characters long. If I leave it as nothing, it's going to look at item index 0, and that's going to be JUser, and that'll be 5. So we've got count and we've got length. Let's talk about using trim. There's some white space in this character, in this string, and I don't want to work with that. So I'm going to do white space equals, paste it. Let's clear this out here. So if I write white space, we're going to see that it's got some indentations there. It's not going to format quite nicely because it's got some spaces in there. It's taking up room. So what if we do white space dot trim? And if I run trim, we notice that it removes that white space off of it. It lines up differently. I want you to remember you need to assign these things. I'm not going to do that anymore just so we can move through these concepts faster. We can trim values out of a string. So for example, I've got this string and I want to get mydomain.com out of there. I can use trim. When we leave it blank, it takes the white spaces out. If at the beginning and the end, if we put something in there, we can see what it will do here. And now I'm going to go trim my domain. I actually want the period gone too, mydomain.com. All right, that all I get back is the server name. We can also trim start and trim end, which is basically the same principle. It will start, if we have this long name here, we trim start and we use the FQDN colon. It will look for, so yeah, we need to be careful because the trim command will find any instance of mydomain.com. So if I have like my brown fox, I own a brown fox and I use trim, it'll take more than I expected. Let's show that. Test string equals I own a brown fox. And now if I test string dot trim and I remove own is here, it's also in brown. Then we have, it did not do what I expected it to do here. Not 100% sure why. What if I do something like this? That is really interesting. It should have taken out, be careful, it should have taken out this in the middle, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's a little difference between the Linux and the PowerShell. I'm guessing trim is looking for stuff at the end or the beginning, and we can test that out really quick here. Aux are strong aux. I'm just putting something in there. Test string. Test string, I can type. And then if I test trim, it will take it out. But if I do something different, like aux are strong aux, let's find out what happens when I trim that. So trim in Linux will take the beginning or the end, but it does not look in the middle. Be careful on Windows. It actually can take the whole thing, or at least at one stage it did. So just be aware that when you're trimming, am I taking stuff in the middle? And that is why we have these two functions that we're going to talk about here, which are trim start and trim end, saying, hey, I just want from the start, I want from the end, basically saying I want the last instance of it, I want the first instance. So it may or may not exist. Just be aware of that. Last thing, let's talk about substrings. And the way to crazy is that strings are actually arrays. Strings are an array of characters, and you can see that the first character, each one of these is a character, and they actually get indexed into the string that way. And we can see that we can actually use substring using that very principle. And we'll paste this in. And I'm going to say that I want test string dot substring, and I want the 7th. If I do that, it's going to go grab, remember, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to start at the 7th item and give you everything else. If I want just ing, it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I can go 4, and now I get ing 1, 2, 3. You can also use substring and tell it where to start. in the case, I want to start at 0 and I want to move 4 characters to the right. And that'll mean I want to include those characters. And what you're really getting here is it's the same thing, but if you don't put the second item in, it says number 4 to the end of the string if you don't put a second value. I'm going to go test substring and I just want ing. And so it's 4 and then we need 3 values. And so I'm going to go, if I do that, let's see, what did I do wrong? Comma, oh, yeah, you don't tell at the end. You say I want 3, not 7, because I went over the length. So I grabbed 3, I'm started item 4, and I'm going to grab the next 3 characters. That gave me ing. I could grab 5, and now I'll get ing 1, 2. So you can break them up in substrings. You can also evaluate whether something contains a string. So if I copy and paste this, we'll make a paste it. And now we'll say contains dot contains, and I'm going to look for the word own. And the answer is true because it's right there. I could also say brown, and it would work, but it is not, case sensitivity does exist here. So brown does not exist. And if you want to check things like that, let's say you've got upper lowercase, you don't want to deal with that. One of the things you could do is you could then say, you could actually do dot to lower dot contains, and then I'm going to put brown like that. Actually, let's do the, because the shouldn't have worked. But it works because this to lower turns this T into lowercase, and then I put the contains and it works. But if I take the to lower out, we'll get a totally different value. It'll tell me false because the has a capital T. So you can use contains. You can also do starts with, which is very similar to the contain, but now you're looking not just in the middle. I want to know that I want to see at the very beginning of my string, does it start? And or the opposite, ends with. And let's just show that. We know I'm going to make my contain string equal I own a brown. I'm just going to put own a brown fox. If I do that, and now I say contain string contains own, I get true. But if I say starts with, I'll also get true. Now if I say, come on. Okay. Hit characters too much. Starts with own. True. But if I say ends with, got to stop pressing, moving back into the middle of this. Okay. Contains string ends with own a brown fox, does not end with own. It comes back false. So you can set in the where in the string do you want to look for the kind of stuff and whether it contains. So you got a lot of flexibility there. There are a lot of ways to manipulate strings. You can change them to work however you need them to work in your environment. I hope this is helpful. If it is, please do me a big favor and give me a thumbs up. And I'd really love it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to continue to be putting out videos on PowerShell. I have videos on Splunk, and I do some other things about how to do home network security, things like that. I highly recommend subscribing to my channel if you find the content I'm making you use. And I hope this stuff helps you and helps you in your home and in your work environment as it relates to PowerShell.